I built a working code lock from the game Rust, with built-in speakers, a working keypad, built-in lights, and even a hidden compartment. Rust is a survival game where it's you versus hundreds of other players, each trying to gain as many resources as possible. So one of the first things every player does is build a base and secure it with a code lock. After designing the outer shell, the first part of the code lock I wanted to tackle was the rusted body. In order to make the 3D printed body look like real metal, I made a custom mix of iron powder and a clear paint. After letting the paint dry, I now needed to rust the iron. My goal for the rust was to get a brown, red, and yellow look. To try and get these colors, I decided on using salt, hydrogen peroxide, vinegar, and copper sulfate for the rusting solution. I wasn't sure of the exact proportions to use, so I made 10 different solutions to test. I then tested all the different formulas on a sacrificial code lock to see which one made the best rust. I then sprayed the actual code lock body with the formula I liked the most. Over just a few minutes, the iron began to heavily rust. This continued over the next few days until the entire body was rusted. Next, for the numpad, I used standard white keycaps that I sharpied the digits onto. I tried my best to mimic the handwriting of the in-game code lock. The next challenge was to make these keys look weathered and used. First, I coated them in a layer of off-white paint, similar in color to sun-damaged plastic. Most of this paint I wiped off to leave just a thin coat. I then used a dark green, grimy color that I again coated on heavily and wiped almost completely off. This did a great job of making the keys look well used while still being able to read the digits. One of the most distinctive parts of the code lock are the huge green and red LEDs on the front face. At first, these seemed like really simple parts to make. My plan was to add some red and green LEDs and a clear 3D printed diffuser. But the terrible diffusion and obvious layer lines made it look horrible. My next idea was to mold and cast the diffusers instead. I first had to print the diffusers out of resin, then to get them super smooth, I sanded and then polished their front faces. Next, I needed to create molds in silicone before I could cast the clear red and green parts. These looked much better, but as soon as I turned the lights on, the micro bubbles in the cured resin were very distracting and did not look great. To fix the bubbles, all I had to do was cast the parts in a vacuum, and to diffuse the lights even further, I backfilled them with silicone. With this final design, when I shined the red and green light through the diffuser, it looked like one huge LED, almost identical to how it looks in game. The next challenge was how to charge the battery in the code lock. My first idea was to use a USB-C port, but I quickly realized this would look completely out of place on the rusted body of the code lock. The only other option I could think of was to use wireless charging. My plan was to use this thin charging circuit that could deliver 5 volts to the main PCB. Next, I made a stand with a built-in wireless charging pad to both provide power and as a way to display the code lock. The biggest issue with the stand ended up being its weight. It was just too light, and trying to balance the heavy code lock ended with it falling 9 out of 10 times. To fix this, I added some weight to the base. And surprisingly, the cheapest and simplest solution I found was to just stack as many pennies in the base as I could fit. In order to control all of the different functions of the code lock in such a small space, I had to design a custom circuit board. This board needed to contain the keypad, power the 2 speakers, control the lights, access sound files from an SD card, and trigger the locking mechanism. Not surprisingly, fitting all of this onto a board that would then fit in the code lock was not easy, and it took a few revisions to get it working correctly. Now with everything wired together, if I use a bolt to just force the lock shut, when I enter the code, the speakers will play, the lights will light up, and the lock will open. This last piece of the code lock was by far the hardest to design, because it's both the mounting point for all the electronics and what the secret compartment slides on. And here's the hidden compartment, where this is the actual compartment that slides along these 2 rails that are mounted to this internal frame that obviously has the rails, but then is also the mounting point for all the electronics and the lock. So you get basically as much travel as possible with rails that span the entire length of the code lock. And it fits into the body just like this, and when you close the box, this front face seals pretty well with the rest of the body. And with all the pieces for the code lock complete, the last thing to do is just put it all together. Now that you've seen how the code lock was built, I'll show you the rest of its features. So if you enter the wrong code, it gives you the warning like in game and plays the sound. And if you enter the wrong code again, the lights flash blue and play the electrocution sound that happens in game as well. But if you enter the correct code, obviously it opens up, and it actually has a pretty big compartment. Like even a pen can fit all the way down because it extends a little bit into the body of the code lock. And then here's a closer look of what it actually looks like. How there's different colors here. Like this is left unrusted, a little bit of white from salt, I think. And then on the back it has even more variation in the color, which I think looks pretty cool. And then here's the charging stand for the code lock. And when I place it on the stand, the lights turn on and they flash in and out, indicating that it's charging, and once it's full, they go solid and stay solid. I hope you enjoyed this video on the code lock. If you did, make sure to like the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe, and that's it.